Okay, so on a sunny day, we are taking you on a private walking tour around Mont Saint-Michel. Actually, this is quite reminiscent of the walking tour that we did in the old town in Croatia, where I took you guys around King's Landing. So make sure to check that out. Okay, so first things first, you see here this granite at the back. This is the original. Just imagine this whole island of Mont Saint-Michel. You know, it is an island, and it was all this. It's all granite, and they had just built a stone all around it. So even the Abbey that you'll find at the very top, which is where we're making our way up right now, is actually built on top of this. You know, the French, they have such a beautiful accent, and then sometimes you can't really catch what she's saying. So Cecile, our guide, was saying that in the past this was not called Mont Saint-Michel. It was also actually called Mont Tombe. Not from the word tomb, but tombe actually means mountain, so it's like mountain. So this formed that mountain, and then so now we are actually working our way up. Get ready for some exercise. So we were told that the military people that you saw earlier up there, I was right. It was really meant to just keep the peace, because I had seen them earlier in that main walkway, the main street in the old town. You know, because in recent times they've had terrorist attacks, they have had rallies in Paris and all these other things. They just want to make sure that everything is in order and also keep the tourists safe. And honestly, when they're walking by, it works. Okay, so just like in any old castle town, or any town for that matter, the village surrounding the church. In this case, there are actually two churches. The one we're actually going to right now is a smaller St. Peter Parish church, and then the one at the very top is actually the Abbey that they consider like a monument church. So it's almost like for like special occasions, unlike the parish church that we actually have right here is open every day. And then what you saw right above there actually is a cemetery. So of course, with a church always comes a cemetery, and for you to be buried here, you actually have to be a resident. So that means that's either 18 or 25 of the residents will be eligible to be buried there. And now I'm about to enter St. Peter's Church. This is inside St. Peter's Church. This is the everyday parish church for the local residents. So this is the one that's open every day. So earlier you saw a cemetery, but this road right here, during excavations 10 years ago, that was 2013, they had actually discovered 40 bodies buried here in an old cemetery. So these cobblestones right here was a former cemetery. They're now in a museum somewhere in Hannah and being studied. So we are now ascending up the stairs onto the Abbey, so from one church to another. So a lot of people think that the people come here for the pilgrimage is for this Abbey. I mean, yes, technically, but actually there is a very small secret chapel inside the Abbey. So I'm going to tell you guys more about that in just a second. Whew. Okay. And even more stairs going up there. Okay, so we are going up. Yeah, so you gotta have good shoes, a good breakfast, perhaps a good meal, and a good enough core. This is how the legend goes. So there was a bishop in 709. The year is 709, and Saint Michael had actually appeared to him in a dream, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And he had asked, Saint Michael had asked him to build a church in his honor. And of course, I mean, if you're any Tom, Dick, and Harry, no matter how religious you are, imagine a saint or whatnot asking you to build a church in their honor, and you're just some random bishop. How are you gonna do it? It's gonna be hard. It's gonna take some convincing. So Saint Michael did just that. Third luck's the charm. After the 3rd apparition in his dream, Bishop Aubert was convinced, alrighty, I'm gonna build you a church. Fast forward to later, we have this beautiful abbey right here that we are about to see. Although, truth be told, that the church that he had built is not actually the abbey. The church that he had built is going to be inside that abbey. It's just that because through years and centuries and so on, because so many pilgrims have actually come here, the town has grown and it has progressed. It actually gone through a lot, from even becoming a prison during the French Revolution, where the monks were asked to leave by Napoleon Bonaparte. So for 70 years, this was actually a jail. In the 11th century, when a church was erected, that collapsed. Because, you know, remember, the architecture of this island, just take a look at the landscape. We are on an island, and that rock that you saw earlier, it's pretty precarious. And so therefore that stability, then knowing that the tides are coming in, the water, so it makes actually the land below it very soft, causing erosion for it to sink, and so on and so forth. So the layers as to how this abbey was actually built was in phases. You know, it started off really small and it just became bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and the village also just expanding with that need. So we are now here at the very, very top. While people are taking photos with this view, it's kind of not pretty. So you want this view right here, but technically the best view is really if you are all the way down there, right? That makes absolute sense. Okay, so let's think about this. You see this bridge over here? So once upon a time that didn't exist, but back in 2015, so from 2005 to 2015, it took about 10 years to build that bridge. And the reason why they needed to do that is because before it was actually a road, and because of that road, it actually caused the water to be stuck, meaning stagnant water, or it couldn't actually flow out into the bay, and it was causing, of course, a lot of problems, right? Silt. So silt is it's like a sediment that's a combination of, I think, rock and clay, and there was a lot of it that was here, causing a lot of problems. And thankfully, when it was inaugurated in 2015, on low tide, you can actually see the stilts. But then when it's really high tide, I read that it actually reaches, the waves are the largest in Europe, up to 50 feet tall. That's crazy. I mean, earlier when we arrived, you saw that wind. It was insane. And this is also a great way to give you more like a reality versus expectation. Of course, your expectation is what you see on Instagram, where there's like a zigzag of the water, you know, leading up to it. And that's the zigzag over there. there's no zigzag because, yeah, it's low tide, but it's not too low tide, and then it's been raining, so there's a lot of puddles in it as well. And then what they don't tell you on Instagram, that a lot of this gray area right here, because like I said, it's raining, it's by the water when it's low tide, there's also quicksand, so it's actually quite dangerous as well. So this is a model of Mont Saint-Michel before the 18th century. Things have changed already, like for one, there's supposed to be a spire. So the church is supposed to represent God and the clergy, who is at the top, and hierarchy goes down where it's all the shops and the restaurants or the stores, which is sort of like the noblemen. And then when you get down here, when it's right outside the walls or by the walls, it's sort of supposedly the fishermen and just the village people. It's the rest of the population. Okay, so I'm now inside the church, and if you take a look, if you're used to Catholic or European churches, they're very ornate, a lot of gold, a lot of carvings and all that, but unfortunately this one is quite simple. During the Revolution, you know, they were against like the king. They were also against religion because at that time the king was considered like God, so there were people who were against that. So a lot of these windows like that you see up here, like the lead that connected like all those stained glass, they were made into weapons. So a lot of what you see right now in the church were looted. Like these windows that you see over here, they were just built in the 1950s. All these stained glass windows are actually very new. And the reason why they're doing that, well, so that they can accommodate tourists, and it's just, and of course, for light. So just to show you, over here on my left-hand side is a very Romanesque architecture. And this is more of the original structure. So earlier I was sharing with you that there are actually different phases to how this church or this abbey was built. So in the very beginning, it was the very simple church that Bishop Aubert had built for St. Michael, which is actually underneath us. Unfortunately, there's a need for special access. It's not open to the public. There's a special key to get in there. And apparently that the chapel is pretty much as big as that altar right there where the mosaic is. So it's just really, really small. And then when they have found out, when the monks had discovered, you know, the body of Bishop Aubert, and they found that there was a hole, supposedly where St. Michael had actually touched him. So of course it became a holy site. So now, of course, the King of Normandy and the royal family had wanted to build a church in his honor, and it wasn't really so much of a religious thing, but it's also to show the other countries, look how powerful we are. And so because the king was also considered like God, building a church is like building a kingdom. So they had built a church from the baby one to the one in I think 173, 193, and that had collapsed. And then I believe this is the third attempt. So this is from 1093, and then this right here, the Gothic architecture, is the third attempt. Whew, that's a lot of churches. So if you are a fan of going on religious pilgrimages, you know that you will travel far and wide to show your devotion for your favorite saint or whoever it is that you believe in. These are some of the banners from the 15th century that pilgrims would bring. Like, let's say you have your group, so you have like your group banner, and they would bring them here. And then there is actually a little display case that you see right there, that there is a hat, and there are little molds right there at the bottom of the display case. So back in the 15th century, if you were a pilgrim, you could actually come here to this church, and they would literally make a pin for you that you see on that hat, and they would make it right in front of you and to give to you as a remembrance. Unfortunately, nowadays that doesn't happen anymore. You know why? Because you can buy those pins in every shop downstairs, any 50 of them, right? Isn't that lovely? If only all these artisans could still do that for us today. And from the excavations from the monks, they had discovered a body, and that body, that skull actually had a hole, and they presumed that this is the skull of Bishop Aubert. Okay, we were not given the memo of how stunning this place is. So they had closed the terrace earlier to prevent people from coming to this room because of the winds. But thank goodness that they had opened the doors, because just take a look at this. It's considered the most beautiful area in the whole abbey. So you see why people are fascinated by this area right here, because you think it's suspended, but there's actually glass. Crazy. So from entering the terrace right outside, we are brought to this room that is right over here. Would you guess what this is? This is actually a dining room. So this is a dining room of the monks. There were 60 of them. Now, do you think it's big enough? I know, right? Okay, so just take a look at the natural light that you see all around. So of course, apart from it being centuries ago before electricity was even available, or you know what, not even candles. We're not even thinking about candles, because Benedictine monks, in this case, they were only allowed to eat during the day when the sun was out, not at night where there were candles, where they would use candles. And in a way, some people might think they shouldn't do that, that's not fair, you know, but actually, if you follow circadian rhythm, right? It's like when you get up when the sun rises, and then you go to sleep when the sun goes down. So if anything, this is actually really, really good for your health as well, following nature's clock, if you will. Now, over there at the corner, I wish I could actually sing a tune right now. No, but if I could actually speak a little louder, the audio in this place is actually quite spectacular. The echo is just phenomenal, and the reason why that was designed to be that way, with all these arches, and you see here the dome is actually quite round, and all our windows right here also quite round, which actually helps the sound to be contained, is because that there would be a monk who would actually be reading while the monks were eating. Reading liturgy. So you make your way down, coming from the monk's dining room, down the stairs, and you now make your way here. This is sort of like the receiving area for the rich noblemen. So who are the rich noblemen? We're talking kings, queens, patrons of the church. These are the people who actually donated money to help build the abbey and the church. And then that over there was actually the kitchen. And it was actually quite warm in here, because that over there was a fireplace. So remember how I was saying that toilets, especially when you live in a castle or in a castle town, you will go to so many castles all over Europe, toilets were not a thing. You would have to travel to a very separate building. That's why a lot of the kings and queens back in the day, they had really bad dental hygiene, because having to brush their teeth for like 2 minutes and then come back to their castle, it's a bit of a journey. But right here, where the noblemen would go to, do you see these, or the pilgrims who would travel, make their way here, the ones who had money, these two doors, which is right here, and then the other one is like right doot. Okay, so these were doors that would lead to the balcony, and in that balcony there are 3 holes. Can you guess what they're doing? Mer de la Mont Saint-Michel. they would basically take a dump. And because we are here at the back of the village, and the village is right over there, there's nothing to see there. So it's basically a very medieval septic tank, a medieval toilet. So, and I said, would I actually fall in the water? And Cecile said no. Basically, the crap would just fall onto the walls. You see, like the merde would just like fall into the walls like here, and it would create, I guess, like a canvas of shit. Classy. So we're actually right underneath the altar, right there. And in the past, this used to be sort of like a shortcut on how to build stuff. It would be like a shaft. So they would get stuff here from the bottom during construction, and then they would use that hole to build it, bring all the way up. And then Gothic architecture, you can actually see, like, you know, quite solid with all the arches, all these different pillars, was when the church was reconstructed compared to the Romanesque side. Now the Romanesque side, not to say it wasn't built well, it's just that it did stand for 400 years. But after it collapsed, the Gothic style has remained to what it is, thanks to these babies. So this is an original chapel where pilgrims would come to pray before they actually make their way up to the main abbey. So this was an ancient, I wouldn't say hamster wheel, that they would use to lift. It was a medieval mechanism in order to lift materials from one area to another. It was used for construction. I'm not even trying to be like a major engineer right now, but I think you guys are there, what he's doing right now. So it's like rolling, right? Anyway, what was more interesting about all these mechanisms right here, I mean, if you think about it, somebody had to man all of these very primitive machines. And of course, it was the prisoners. So earlier I had shared with you for 70 years that this, the Abbey was actually transformed into a prison. So there are a lot of prisoners here, and what do a lot of prisoners do? They are free labor. They were used to make goods, to do services for absolutely nothing. So this room is actually quite interesting, the history. At some point, monks, every one of us, we die, and monks do. How they were buried is, of course, when they were sick, they would first be in an infirmary right behind those doors. Infirmary is like a little clinic where they're on their deathbed. And on the walls of that infirmary is a painting, or paintings like this. Basically, it was like showing man preparing for death, looking to God. Okay, and then here, this is what you call an ossuary, I believe, where they had actually, I think they burned the bodies. Oh my God, I hope I'm saying that right. But something to that effect. Well, the point what I'm trying to say is, from the West, you have your infirmary, and then eventually they die. And then you see here, that's the Alpha and the Omega. And it's just a gentle reminder to monks that, you know, even if it is death, that not to worry, because you're going towards that way, you're going towards the Lord, you're going towards the light. It's also going towards the east, which is going towards Jerusalem. And at the same time, the cemetery was right over there. So again, totally not by accident whatsoever. It's actually quite beautiful and quite practical. So from sickness to the death to the burial. And usually monks were not allowed to have, like, you know, a fireplace, because that was considered a pleasure to keep warm. But because they were working and transcribing, making manuscripts and writing a lot of documents, transferring from books to I don't know what, but gathering information, and everything was done by hand because there were no scanners at this point. Of course, it was important to be at least a little comfortable. So that is the exit right there from the Abbey. You're making your way down. And remember that time I told you, like at the very bottom is where all the poor people, the commoners are? You are led here. This is where nowadays you buy tickets. So does that mean we're the commoners? So 15th century, you would get a pin that was made right in front of you. See, I remember everything you say. But nowadays, you can just buy it in the gift shop for 88 euros. A little bit pricey, but what you're paying for is the experience.
Exactly.
And it's probably never going to happen again. So thank you, Cecile. So it is about 5 p.m. and it has already rained. The wind has made its presence known. With a beautiful way to cap the day where we had the goods that we bought blessed by the parish priest from the church. And we were blessed as well. Apart from the goods, my sister and I were blessed. It was just so timing that when we were paying, he just happened to be there. And he blessed us. So we would like to think that St. Michael sent over a special someone to do that for us. So thank you. Continuing with the St. Michael theme, there's more St. Michael and all these different pilgrimage sites that you would probably enjoy on the channel. So check out my religious pilgrimage playlist, Europe playlist, Italy playlist, France playlist. There's a whole lot of those. So anyway, from Mont Saint-Michel here in France, I'm Bianca Valerio.